I'm sitting here beside the lake at Big Lake Camp, our church campground here in Nova Scotia. And I was just thinking of my prayer time from this past week, and one of the things that has been on my mind is the story of Samuel the prophet from the Old Testament. There's two books in the Old Testament, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, about his life and his obedience and his call. Samuel's mother, her name was Hannah. She was one of two wives of a certain man a long time ago. You can read about it there in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2. It talks about her. She had no kids, and the other wife had a number of kids, and she tormented Hannah. So much so that Hannah decided to make this a matter of prayer and of waiting on God. And God answered her prayer, and Samuel was born. And Hannah had made this pledge, this promise that if God would give her a son, she would dedicate him back to the work of the Lord. And so at a certain age, Samuel then was taken back to the temple, and Eli was the priest then, and Samuel was dedicated as a priest in training. Some time went on, and Samuel learned a lot, but still just a young boy. And one night as he lay in his bed, he heard someone calling, and they said, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel got up and he went to Eli, and he said, "What is it that you need?" Eli was the priest. And Eli said, "I never said anything. I didn't call you." He said, "Go back and lay down." So Samuel went and laid down again. And second time he heard this voice calling to him, "Samuel, Samuel." He got up, went to Eli, said, "Here I am, Lord. What is it you need?" And Eli said, I didn't call you. Go lay down. Go to sleep." Happened the third time, and Samuel heard the voice calling to him, "Samuel, Samuel." So Samuel got up, went to Eli, and Eli understood then that perhaps it was God calling to him. So Eli said to Samuel, "Samuel, next time, if there is a next time, when you hear the voice calling to you, what you need to do is say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and laid down, and the same thing happened. You know the story, probably. Samuel, as he lay in his bed waiting to hear this voice, heard it again. The voice said, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel responded, said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And then God told him a number of things that were about to happen, and the journey began of Samuel as a prophet. I've often wondered about this story. You see, the Bible begins with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and there we find that God came looking for them, and he said, "Adam, where are you?" Adam was hiding, of course, because of sin, but it was God that initiated, and he called to him. He wanted to have a conversation with him. And then we have Samuel, and this whole story that happened there, and then we have like Jesus walking along the seashore perhaps much like this. And as he was walking along with Peter after the crucifixion, and he said, Peter, do you love me?" Remember, he asked this question 3 times. But he said, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter responded back, and he said, "Lord, yes, I love you." He said again, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And then Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And then the question again, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" And Peter responded, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And then Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." The interesting thing about this is God called these people, and God called these people quite often. He calls to people quite often. But he waits for a response with Samuel. I've wondered, why didn't God in the conversation with Samuel just, Samuel, I've got something to tell you, listen to what I'm saying, and just begin to talk to him? But he didn't. He waited for Samuel's response. Same thing with Peter. Before Jesus said, feed my lambs, he waited for Peter's response. You know, I believe that God speaks to us in prayer quite a bit. And I'm hopeful that over these last number of weeks you have been able to be silent and to hear the voice of God. The interesting thing about this is God speaks to us for a reason. Now if Samuel was like us, think about this now. If Samuel was like us, and you heard God speaking to you, and God said, Ruth, or Walter, Claretta, Wanda, Steve, Tyler, Jody. If you heard God speaking to you in the middle of the night, or even in your prayer time, and you looked around and you said, what was that? I'm not sure how many of us would be really keen to go and to say, the Lord spoke with an audible voice to me last night. Now, what God spoke to Samuel was that he was going to do some pretty terrible things to Eli's family because of sin. Their sin had poisoned the temple. Their sin had poisoned, if we were to translate it to our context, the sin of the priest and his family had poisoned the church. Now, if God spoke into your life in prayer, what would you do with that? We would probably keep it to ourselves and say, I don't know if I can say anything about that. Or what will people think if I stand up in church and all of a sudden share a testimony of God spoke to me in prayer? They'll all think I'm crazy. No one will believe me. See, I say this because these are thoughts I've had in the beginning, a number of years ago. God would speak into my life, and as I prayed with people, and in the very beginning, I remember thinking, if I say anything, they're going to think I'm nuts. Except that everything, as I began to speak about it, people began to say, that's true. How did you know about that? That's real. That's exactly right. How did this happen that you knew that? And then it moved from that to when I was preaching, and God would say something in the middle of a sermon that I was supposed to say, and then someone afterwards would say to me, you were preaching at me, weren't you? How did you know about that? I'd say I didn't. God did. You see, when God speaks to us in prayer, when God speaks to us anytime, it's not just so that you can hide it away as a treasure in a treasure chest and bury it in the ground someplace. But it's so that people will hear what he has to say. I wonder how many times the Lord speaks to us and we don't say anything about it. I've noticed something in the context of this. I've noticed that if you don't say what the Lord tells you to say, his voice gets softer and softer until you can hardly hear it. But the opposite is also true, that if you say what the Lord tells you to say, his voice gets clearer and louder next time. Curious. I really hope that you have been able to join us in the time of prayer in these last few weeks. There's just maybe a week and a bit left until the end of the month, until our 30 days are up. I hope that you have enjoyed the time of prayer that has been and all that has been about. I hope that it has increased your faith. My deep desire is that God would heal the land. I'm absolutely confident the Liberal Party of Canada is not going to heal the land. I don't think the Conservative Party or the Green Party or the NDP or any political party can heal the land. The problems now have become way too large. Only God can heal our land. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, seek my face, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. You know, we have an opportunity as Christians to manifest the presence of God with courage, with strength, with love. Sometimes as we're praying, I want to mention this, sometimes as we're praying, the Lord speaks to us through His Word or through a passage of Scripture. Sometimes as we're praying and we're not hearing anything, and so I pause. This is what I do. I pause and I wait, and then I turn to the Bible and I say, Lord, show me what you would have me to see. And I begin to kind of glance through the Word, and by something stands out, something powerful and real, and there it is. He speaks through His Word in answer to prayer. The invitation is always given. Mark, are you there? He doesn't continue until I say, yes, Lord. I'm here, I'm listening. And then He begins to speak. And sometimes I say, Lord, I didn't quite catch that last piece, or didn't quite understand what you were saying. And He explains it. He's a good Father. You know, my prayer for you and for the church in these days is that we would become alive to Him. He said, listen to this. He said, the last days I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. I believe this is that time. The end of days is close. If the Lord is speaking to you, I would love to hear what He has to say. Send me a note. If you have a question, just kind of write me a question. I'll try to answer it in the next couple of weeks. Or if there's something that you want me to talk about, just let me know. If the Lord has put something on your heart or in your mind, we've only got a couple more weeks that I'll be perhaps doing this kind of thing, but I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question or two, and then I'll try to respond through a reflection. But in the meantime, let's continue to pray. In the meantime, let's continue to get the mud and the dirt out of our lives, and so out of our church. Let's continue to embrace the Word of God and the gold that pours out of heaven into His church. Let's be all that He wants us to be, in faith, in life, and living in His blessing. Well, God bless you, folks. I think I'm going to sit here for a couple minutes more. Look at that sun going down. Why, that just kind of broke underneath that cloud. My soul, that's bright. Look, there's almost a cross showing up there. The wings of an angel. We serve a great God.